Wall.
Joining us now in anticipation of that anniversary, Craig Shirley, the president of Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs and author of the book Reagan's Revolution, the untold story of the campaign that started it all. Craig, it's so good to have you here on America's Forum.
Thank you, JD.
And of course, as we remember the story, as you and others have reported it, the State Department was trying to tell President Reagan to take out the line, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Elaborate on just what went on with that speech.
Well, typically, as you know, with domestic speeches the presidents give, they go through the political shop and they go through the White House public affairs shop. But foreign policy speeches have for many years been, quote unquote, vetted by the State Department, and this was no exception. The very reason Reagan was able, actually several years earlier, to issue the term evil empire when describing the Soviet Union was because he was giving a speech to a group of evangelical pastors in Florida. So it didn't go through the normal vetting process of the State Department, who probably would have insisted time and time again that calling the Soviet Union an evil empire has to come out. But with the speech at the Berlin Wall, it had to go to the State Department. It had been put in there by Reagan, and the State Department took it out. He got the draft back. He put it back in. It went back to the State Department, and they took it out. The third time is that it came back, and he had been taken out. He put it back in, and gave that historic speech, and the one that virtually everybody who objected to it at the time later said, yes, it was the right thing for Ronald Reagan to say.
And do you think it was that particular line that made his speech so powerful?
Yeah, without a doubt. Their presidents are defined by speeches, by certain lines, by certain phrases. With Washington, it was government is like fire is a terrible master and a wonderful servant. With Lincoln's words at the Gettysburg Address, with FDR, we shall gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God, in his day of infamy speech, with John Kennedy in his Ich bin ein Berliner. So the great presidents are memorable because they issue great lines, and this is certainly, Reagan gave many, many great speeches, but it has to be considered one of his greatest and most important because it does lead to the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union, something he had been thinking about and writing about and had concerned himself with for his entire adult life. He wrote about bringing down the wall. He wrote a letter in 1980 to a friend saying that Kennedy had made a mistake by allowing the Soviets to build it in the first place. He issued statements every year on the anniversary of the building of the wall. So it was on his mind throughout his entire life, as was the defeat of Soviet communism.
Ronald Reagan was called the great communicator, and of course, Craig, it obviously in terms of foreign policy and the confrontation with the Soviets, but back home, a political confrontation. Tell you what, you have so much to talk about with this interesting subject that you covered in your book. When we come back, we'll talk about an impromptu, extemporaneous speech that then Governor Reagan gave that lasted all of about 7 minutes that you credit as really the start of the conservative renaissance. We'll resume our conversation with our friend Craig Shirley, Skyping in from Washington, D.C., because you'll really want to hear this story, another famous Reagan speech that may have changed history. That's when we come back here on America's Forum.